Awesome. I love it. I was doing like a get ready with me on TikTok and I was like, I already know I'm gonna love chatting with them. I already know it's gonna be good, good questions and good conversation. Hey everyone, I'm NASCAR driver Natalie Decker, and you're listening to Victory Lane Vibes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Not Chicanery. I know that I am the host and the introductory voice for this episode, but I can assure you that we are not talking about sports cars today, but rather we have an interview. Say hello to one Miss Natalie Decker. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. How are we doing today? First of all.
I'm doing pretty good. I'm from the Charlotte area. That's where I currently live right now. I'm not originally from there. And the pressure, when it changes because of the storms, like outside, I have an autoimmune disease. So it'll like flare it up. So today is like an okay day for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I do have some family in that general area. I was there a couple years ago, and because I have lived in flat as a billiard table, Michigan and South Texas, and I'm like, what on earth is this nonsense?
It's crazy. It'll be like downpouring. And then 2 seconds later, it's sunny and 75.
That's the
Yeah,
North Carolina weather. It's consistently inconsistent. I've lived here my whole life,
Very.
and I remember one time there was snow on the ground. It was 80 degrees the next day. It was crazy.
That sounds about
No,
right.
literally, that's it. Yeah.
but at any rate, we are very, very grateful that you took the time to come and chat and hang out with us today. So we talked to you a little bit about it, sort of off mic, if you will. But we'll kind of go, dare I say, kind of round robin style. Just meant to be kind of fun and conversational. Is the word I'm looking for. So to kick us off, Arthur, Kiana, which one of y'all want to go first? But first, a word from our sponsor, Homefield Apparel. Homefield has entered the thrilling world of motorsports with the Hendrick Motorsport Collection, which is available to pre-order now. Based out of Indianapolis, you likely already know Homefield for their high-quality, officially licensed collegiate apparel. You probably also know that they have more than 180 schools on their roster, so there's a little something for everyone. I mean, seriously, they even have my local Division II school, Wayne State University. Given Homefield's storied legacy and throwback college apparel and their relentless commitment to quality, moving to racing apparel seemed like the next logical step, and that's reaffirmed in their meticulous approach to designing the Hendrick Motorsport Collection. Iconic logos, legendary drivers, and unforgettable moments, this collection is a celebration of the golden era of NASCAR. Here at Victory Lane Vibes, we're super excited to get our hands on what Homefield has cooked up. Their collegiate wear is second to none. And in concert with some of the most legendary drivers and one of the most legendary teams in NASCAR history, the Hendrick Motorsports Collection is a banger. To learn more, visit www.homefieldapparel.com. Their online storefront is easy and convenient to navigate, making it that much easier for you to proudly represent your favorite drivers and relive NASCAR's glory days. And be sure to use promo code VLV24 for 15% off at checkout on your first order. Again, the Hendrick Motorsport Collection is available to pre-order now. Use promo code VLV24 for 15% off at checkout on your first order. And thanks again to Homefield Apparel for supporting this podcast.
I can go first.
You can go. Yeah.
So, getting ready for this, I watched a bunch of your YouTube content, and you spent a lot of time talking about all of the prep work that went into the Daytona race and how it wasn't the typical week. And you didn't have the runway that you would have liked to start that race and prepare. So I'm just curious if you could, share with the listeners maybe a little bit of what that was like. And then part two of my question would be, for different types of tracks, do you prepare differently? So is a Daytona different from an Atlanta or a Martinsville? Just as a driver, how do you approach the tracks?
Okay, we'll start with the first one. So yes, it was crazy. The sponsorship for Daytona came so last minute. I didn't know I was racing until about 2 weeks before we were on track taking the green flag. And that was wild. There's a lot of prep that goes into it, not even just with like the race car in the shop, but as a driver. So all like SFI, like all that rating for safety, like things like that change every year. You have to get things recertified. You have to get new helmets if yours is out of date, like all this stuff. And my seat wasn't up to date. All these things had to happen under 2 weeks because in 2 weeks I was going to be taking the green flag at Daytona. And that was the hardest part for me, is to get all my stuff gathered and ready. And like I should have had it ready, even if I didn't think I was going to be racing Daytona. So I thought I had time, but I should have known that something crazy could have happened and I could have got the call and we could have been going to Daytona. So I should have had that ready. But on my end, I was doing all of that. And then on the race team's end, they had to build a whole car in 2 weeks and they had to fit me in the car. So I'm very small. I'm only in about like 5 feet, 100 pounds. So I'm a very small person and they have to like do pedal extensions, move the dash, make special shifters for me. So there's like a lot of fabrication that goes into it. And that takes time because some things are sometimes it's like trial and error and they have to build false floors and all like they have to rebuild everything on the inside of the car for me. And so we were at the shop for probably like 4 different days for a couple hours every day trying to get fitted in the car. So that was pretty intense. But what I loved, I knew we were going to go into Daytona and have a good weekend no matter what happened because I could just see so much effort that the team was putting into. I felt like they really like believed in me and cared about me because how much effort that they put into that car, knowing that it could rain and we didn't have owner points and we won't be racing. Like that was a possibility. And they didn't care that that was a possibility. They still put that car together as best as possible. For example, when I first got the call saying we could go racing, we have a sponsorship. The team owner didn't have enough time to get an A motor. So we call it an A motor, and that's, a motor that's built by Chevy or Ford or Toyota, and it's one of the top best motors you can get. And then there's like B motors where they're motors that teams already know and they're built by a different company that's not backed by a manufacturer. And so we just had a motor in the car that the team already had. So it was going to be like down on horsepower. It wasn't going to be what I was like. All my competitors had A motors, right? So I was feeling like I was going into it, not as prepared with the best car, knowing that we didn't have the best motor. And the team owner, like all day, every day, he fought for me and fought to get the best motor. And we got a Chevy motor. Finally, we got an A motor at like the last minute and that got put in the car. So I just felt like watching them like fight for me to get this car as perfect as possible. I was like so excited to go and race with them. Now, preparing for tracks, like you asked if it was different, preparing for Daytona as if it would be like for Phoenix that's coming up. And absolutely, there are different tracks. I do different things. The biggest thing is I like to watch film. So I'll always watch like the previous race and I'll talk to drivers that have way more experience than me and have raced at these tracks many of times. But for actual practice, like we're not allowed to practice. So the best thing we can do is I have a sim like sitting right here and I like to get on the simulator, especially for like the short tracks or the 1.5 miles and just put in laps. And I wish I would have done that for Daytona. I did a little bit, but I made a mistake on pit road and it was all my fault. And I should have been practicing coming onto pit road and pulling into pit stalls on the sim, because then I would have been able to like understand the space on pit road a lot better if I would have done that. And now going into a next race into Daytona, I will for sure be doing that now. But if it was like Phoenix, I would be on the sim every single day, at least 2 hours, putting in work, doing practice laps. My husband, Derek, he is a great sim racer, so I love it when he coaches me. Sometimes I hate it, but and majority of the time it's okay. Then I like it sometimes, and then sometimes I hate it. And then I like doing like races actually too, and putting myself in racing positions. And that's about the only thing I can do to prepare myself since there's no practice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like we on the show are big proponents for more practice for the drivers. I feel like that's a weekly bell that we ring just because as fans, we want to see it as well. So, I would hope at some point they kind of get their act together and give it to you guys because it seems like it's just something that's so
Yeah.
critical to help you prepare.
I hope so, because if you think about it, when sponsors are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for like one weekend and you're new in the sport and you only have the race to learn, like obviously being in the race is the best way to learn. But if you could have that hour to 2 hours, the day before, the morning of,
Mhm.
that would just be so beneficial, especially to the new drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big discussion too. I was at the Atlanta race weekend, and they pretty much just put them out there, and they get the one little practice to get into the pit, because it's such a weird entrance that they have to use, but that's all they get. And so they get that one little like lap, and then they pull in, and that's it. And everybody on the ground was just like, man, they really need to practice because like
Right?
qualifying is so crazy there. And it's just like, man, just give them a couple laps. Like, why
I
is
know.
this?
It won't take up that much of the day.
Yeah, like
Right.
we're already here. The cars are
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to see the cars, and it's so cool because you have, we had Xfinity out there, and I mean, it was such a cool day because you were getting the truck race, you were getting Xfinity race, you got the cup qualifying, like you got everything. And it was just let them practice. Like, I don't understand.
Right.
It's we're all standing around for like an extra 2 hours down there. Just let them practice. So yeah, it drives me nuts.
I love it. I love that you guys are rooting for practice too. Thank you.
We understand. Like,
There are
we
a few
understand.
topics that we consistently have harped on since this show has started, and that is might be number one, I
Yeah.
think. So
My goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I've said it before, certainly on the main show, but whenever we get on it, it reminds me of it was like 2001, 2002, that old Allen Iverson press conference where he's like, "We talking about practice," and he goes on like that for like 10 minutes, and that is basically that's how we sound,
Mhm.
because we really do beat the drum. It's like it's not that big of a deal, and surely whatever you're saving on the front side by not having folks out running practice is probably almost immediately undone when somebody does something silly because we don't have
Yeah,
practice and then wads up half the field.
literally.
yeah.
Like, it's, oh my God. Yeah, that drives us nuts. But yeah, I mean, it's a valid concern, honestly, because again, when you have newer drivers out there, they need to get a feel for the track. And, somewhere like Daytona, like, I mean, that's a big deal. And like you said, sponsorship opportunities, like, there's so much there that just goes out the window with that. And it's a little frustrating, I'm sure, for, the drivers and the teams, but also for the fans, because we just want to see the cars on the track. I mean, that's why we're watching. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it's very frustrating sometimes.
Okay, Kiana, do you have a
Yeah.
question proper?
Yeah, going back to Daytona, first of all, congrats on leading laps. I was like yelling at my TV because I was just like, yes, we got a girl out there. That's great. Yeah, we were just, everyone that I follow was just so stoked that you were out there leading, and it was just like all these tweets flooding in, just like Natalie's in the lead, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever, and I love that we can all just get together and celebrate things like that. So I'm glad I get to tell you face to face. Congrats. Because that
Thank
was
you.
really, really awesome. Um, and how did it feel? Because I saw that the 91 team came to help you after their day was done. And I thought that was really cool. Can you talk more about that just for people who didn't really know that full story?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. So that was amazing. Like teamwork. That is a true team to do that. And I didn't know during the race that they did that.
Yeah.
It was not communicated to me. It was probably all communicated on channel 2 and I'm only on
Hmm.
channel 1 just because they were only giving me information at the time that was crucial for me. But once I got out of the car and the race was all over, Derek goes and tells me the whole story. And we're filming like a little bit of a docu-series type vibe on my YouTube channel,
Hmm.
and he touched on that a little bit, saying how, they could have easily just taken their suits off and got back to the airport early or their hotel or wherever they were going or go get food and just call it a day.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They
Yeah.
rallied behind me and supported me, and I could feel that. I could feel that energy from Mario, the team owner, on the radio, from my crew chief, my spotter. Everyone had really good energy, and I could feel that I was just like 100% supported and backed and believed in the whole time I was on track. And as a driver, like I'm technically a rookie. Like I'm not running for rookie of the year or anything, but I don't have very many laps in an Xfinity car. And to feel that support behind me gave me a lot of confidence in the race.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool example of, like you said, teamwork. And I feel like a lot of that stuff does go under the radar, but that's why I like being in the infield for races when I can be. I have friends who work for some truck and Xfinity teams, so I do get, down in the pit sometimes. But it is cool to see, how they'll like run and go help somebody real quick if they get cut out of the race, or, just anything they can do. And it's really cool to see that. And I feel like it's a part of NASCAR that people don't necessarily see. I feel like the feuds get more
Oh,
attention.
yeah,
So
they
yeah, of
definitely do.
course.
It's the
So
craziest thing because it's like you could hate someone one weekend because they did something on track or whatever it is, and then the next
uh-huh.
weekend you're like best friends,
Right, yeah.
and they're
Oh my
like, "Oh,
God.
you need this tool quick on pit road? Here you go." Like,
Right.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean it's cool to see that. And I feel like those stories need to be told more often because I've seen it in person, but I think it's cool for people to hear it straight from the drivers because they don't really know, when that actually does happen.
yeah,
So,
and like a quick story, I
mhm,
raced for a team once that the teamwork between teams like that was not there. They
mhm,
felt like they were just straight competitors and no one had each other's back. And for
mhm,
example, this was I was at Vegas and I qualified. It was the top 12. So then you went to the second round. This was back in like 2019.
mhm,
And so I went to the second round, but no one on my team thought we were going to be in the top 12. So they didn't bring like the cool down rig to pit road because like we were struggling in practice. They're like, there's no way, but we pulled it together for qualifying. And I think we like the first round, we qualified 10th. And then we didn't have a cool down rig because no one brought it. And none of my teammates made it in the top 12. And my crew chief asked, they were like, can we use your cool down on Natalie's truck? And none of my teammates, crew chiefs, would let me use it. So then we went out
Wow.
and finished 12th in qualifying because my motor was really hot and not
Oh
running
my
the best.
God.
That's
Yeah.
dirty.
So,
I
like, after
know.
experiencing stuff like that year after year after year, then coming to DGM and
Mhm,
having that pit crew come back me and fully support me and be a part of my team, like that truly meant so much that that's going to carry with me every race I go and race with them the rest of the year. Just because I know that like no matter what, everyone, even if they're on a
mhm.
different car, they have my back.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I love that.
All right, so I am going to now dive headfirst into the esoterica of driver histories that I love oh so much. And when I was doing a bit of reading earlier in the week to kind of prep for this, somehow I didn't know that this was a thing that existed, but the four-cylinder modified stock car. I found a photo of you in this blue
Yes, it's
oval era.
blue.
Yeah, the blue
Yes.
oval era Taurus from, I mean, at this point, 25 years ago. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what on earth is this thing? This looks like something that I would see in like anger racing in the middle of
I
Tennessee.
still have that car.
Wait, seriously?
Oh
Yes,
my
I
God.
still have that car.
Oh my God. But tell me a little bit about that because this looks, like I said, I watched and looked at it a little bit. I'm like, this looks absolutely wild. So please.
I would love to tell you more about that. So, well, I started racing when I was 9 in go-karts, and I did that for about 4 years. And when I was about 12, turning 13, I moved into a stock car, which was that four-cylinder, that blue with the white '04 sticker. And that was my first stock car. And going into that race, I didn't know how to drive stick. I was only 12. So like the night before, my dad was trying to teach me how to drive stick in a Jeep at the campground down the road.
Oh
It was
no.
so embarrassing. I get to the race and I'm like, okay, I don't want anyone to know I'm a girl, number one. And number two, I look like a baby. I'm like, I still look very young. Like I'm 26 years old and people think I'm like 15. So like when I was 12, I looked 5. So I went to the driver's meeting fully suited up, like in my race suit, the helmet, gloves, like the Hans device, everything, because I was like, I'm not going to let anyone know what I look like. I don't want anyone judging me. And it was great. And the first race I did in that car was it was called Golden Sands Speedway and it's in Plover, Wisconsin. And then finally later that year, I won my first race in that car at that same track where I had my first start.
Oh, that's fun.
Love that.
And
Okay,
I was
so you still
oh.
have it. Is it just a commemorative thing? Does
Yeah,
it see any use of any
it
sort?
could go to the track and race if we wanted it to, but it was my first ever like stock car, like full size, well, almost full size. It's kind of small.
Yeah,
You
by
Like
can't get
modern
rid.
standards, yes.
it was my first race car with a roll cage, so we had to keep it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That
No, I
is,
support either. I support that. Keep it in the garage forever, right? Like you always have. That's always like the first win, especially. Like you got to keep that.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much fun. Oh, did you hear my dogs? I'm sorry.
yeah, that's okay.
No, it's all
I
right.
got pets.
Oh, you should hear mine. He's like outside my door trying to like bust it down like a cop right now. So he's not happy.
Yeah, see, I just have a turtle, so he doesn't make me
Oh,
mad.
That's what you need to get.
Yes, I
Need
did.
a turtle.
We've got the
poor
whole,
thing.
the whole zoo. Because I've got cats, and they try to bust in the door as well. Like I had
Oh
to
my god.
literally lock the door to keep them from getting in.
Yeah, yeah, but the turtle's name is Squirt after the same one in Finding Nemo.
Oh, I love that.
Wait, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was working complete non sequitur, but this is pet, so it's fine, I promise. Yeah, I found him. I was because my mom is a teacher. And at the time, I mean, this was like almost 10 years ago. She was teaching elementary school. I was helping with field day. A student brings me what looks like a little rock. And so, and I'm like, okay, you know the rules, outside stuff stays outside. And then he pokes his head out. I mean, he was like the size of like a nickel.
Oh my god.
He was a hatchling, and it's like, okay, well, how on earth does a turtle end up in the middle of Detroit? It's like, can somebody please riddle me that? Never did figure that out, but then he ended up becoming the class pet for my mom because she taught kindergarten for a
Oh,
while, and then COVID happened. Of course, lockdowns. He gets brought home, and then somewhere along the lines, I'm still not quite sure how this act happened, but I ended up with him, which I mean, like, he's my buddy. So, I mean, I don't mind like one bit, but
I love it.
yep. So he is a Midwestern painted turtle. He's part of the reason why Squirt is apt for him is because also for male painted turtles of his age, he's actually kind of small. So
Oh,
yeah, I mean, he fits in the palm of my hand.
Oh my gosh.
oh
Yeah, he's not
wow.
very big, and he's got to be nearing on 10 years old at this point. It feels like so.
Oh.
He should be bigger than that, really. But anyway, pet non sequitur aside, let's say Arthur, Kiana.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah, go
go.
ahead.
It's hard to follow that up, right? Like
Right.
really threw me to the wolves after that.
Have a
No.
giraffe. No, I'm kidding.
Right. So I think a lot of people who may only know you from, ARCA Xfinity trucks don't realize the length of career you've had. And you mentioned you started driving at 9,
Mhm.
and you've driven karts, late models. You did GT Audi. You've done a bunch of different things. So I'm just curious, do any of these different vehicles that you've raced in stand out to you as your favorite? Did any like fit your style as a driver more particularly versus others? Is there anything that you were like, I can't wait to get back in that? I love it.
Well, definitely a few are my favorites. I grew up racing super late models around the Midwest, and I won a lot of races in that class that I was in. So I definitely feel like it fits my driving style a lot. Um, I love road racing, and I know you brought that up with the GT4, but um, I did race an Audi for a little bit, and I think I liked that car because it was, like, sexy. It was, like, and it was an Audi R8, like, that was, like, a dream car for me to have on the street, and I got to race it at the track on the weekends. So that's why I liked that one, and we did win a few races, in that class as well, and the crazy thing is I am not a road racer, so I would hire, an expert, like a road racing coach to come in and help me through the weekend. And I did win a few times with the driver coach, but the crazy part is my husband Derek, the days that like the weekends we couldn't afford to have the coach there, Derek would step in and do it. And we have won every single race together. Like so I'm like nervous for him to do it again. I'm like, we can't do that again because what if we break the streak?
Right, you got to go out on top, right?
But there is the first ever road course I went on that like wasn't in a go-kart was Sebring, and it was in a LMP3 car. That was the first time I ever did anything on a road course. That was insane because it was a 2-day like track session thing, so it was full days for 2 days straight. And like the first day, like the slowest cars on track were faster than me because I was like so new at it, so confused. But by the time the weekend was over, I was like running everybody over. I was so fast.
Love it.
I was like, this is amazing. I love road racing. I get it now.
Yeah.
It's funny on Chicanery, we joke about me and my co-host about particularly multi-class racing. We, the certified LMP3 moment. So where, LMP3, usually annihilates either the front runners in the class above or in GT. So hopefully we didn't have any of those.
That's
I really enjoy road racing. It's also less expensive for the sponsors, so that's a plus.
Yeah.
But it's just not as big in the US here. It's way bigger overseas. So it is a little difficult to sell the sponsorship for it because it doesn't have the big name like NASCAR does.
true.
Yeah, we beat the drum a lot about that on the sports car show too. It's
I
like
know,
everybody,
it's so
if you
good. Like, how is it not just as popular?
know.
It's better. Like,
yes, it is, and then we say that all the
it's
time. We're
so
like,
much
okay, if you have functioning eyes, ears, firing synapses, then you should be watching sports car racing.
And
Right.
the people that go to those races that I meet are just so wonderful. Like the fans in NASCAR can get really toxic, and the fans in road racing are just no one's toxic. Everyone's
We're just
drinking
vibing.
champagne and eating cheese, and their shirts are on.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the lifestyle.
Yeah, we're just drunk as hell singing Kumbaya in the infield. That's pretty much what
I love
endurance
it.
racing, particularly if you go to Sebring or the 24 Hours of Daytona.
Yeah.
It's like you have like Sebring and like 24 Hours of Daytona, and then you look at like Talladega and you're like, oh my God. Like it's just it's a full spectrum though. I kind of
Yes.
like that though. Like I like that there's a place for really everybody,
There
no matter
is,
what type of racing you want to watch, but
what
it is
kind of
just
party
really
they
funny.
want to.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah,
whatever type of
yeah.
party you want. But
And they get
that's
real
hilarious.
rowdy at Le Mans and the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. Like if you want to talk
Oh, God, I
about
wanna go
party
there
at a
so
race
bad.
circuit, those two are it. As a part of my previous professional career, I've had the pleasure of doing the big 24-hour marquee events. I've done Le Mans, I've done Nordschleife, I've done Daytona, and it is insane at Le Mans and the Nordschleife, particularly the Nordschleife. It's just everybody's hooting and hollering, and it's 24 hours. And I mean, you're closer to the circuit at the Nordschleife than you are at basically any other venue, given the way it kind of cuts through the scenery. But now,
Oh,
sports
wow.
car racing and the fandom is super duper fun. I mean, it has its moments where it's a little bit less fun. For I guess a little bit of a teaser for the next chicanery episode, we talked about the utter dismay at the fan base of the Toyota hypercar being very slow at Qatar and the reactions that elicited from the fan base. But otherwise, they're wonderful.
I actually have a question, just kind of going off of that and, the fandom and everything that we have all seen as motorsports fans. Um, I had a very interesting interaction with someone a couple weeks ago. Kind of went viral, which was crazy because I didn't expect it. But I had my NASCAR jacket on in Walmart, and this guy came up to me and was like, "Oh, is that your boyfriend's jacket? What do you know about NASCAR?" And he had a Kyle Busch shirt on, and I was like, "Oh, I'm about to get this dude." Because last summer in Atlanta, I met Kyle Busch and took a selfie with him. So I was like, "Oh, yeah, NASCAR." And I just pulled up my phone and like showed him the picture with Kyle Busch. He was like, "Oh, whoops." And it's, it's like,
Now you feel dumb.
right. It's like, I can laugh about it now, but at the same, at that moment, I was just like, oh my God, he really thought I didn't know anything about NASCAR. And then to assume that it's like my partner's jacket or whatever, don't even really have one. That was, yeah. So it was just really frustrating. I'm like, gosh. But I feel like, just as a motorsports fan, being a woman, being a Black woman, we just don't get that, assumption ever. Like people see me and they're like, oh, you're a NASCAR fan. Oh, you watch, Formula One, you watch IndyCar. And I'm like, yeah, I love all that stuff. I grew up on that stuff. My dad loves cars. That's really where I got it from. And so I feel like people just misunderstand women who are involved in motorsports in any way. Um, and it's hard to really think about how we can change that perception. So I like hearing from drivers, particularly, like, how do we change that perception? How do we get those misunderstandings out of the way? Because it's just really frustrating sometimes, being a woman just watching the sports. I can't imagine what it's like being in the sport, directly.
Well,
But
first, I love that you fell in love with racing because of your dad, because
yeah,
same.
yeah.
And that's the only reason why I love it. He taught me and now I'm addicted.
I love it.
But, I think about this a lot because it's so difficult because you can't change someone's beliefs. If they believe
Right.
something, it's hard, and then you feel like you're arguing with like a wall. Like you
Yeah.
can't. It's really difficult. And where I always think about where the change needs to happen is from NASCAR, the sanction body itself. It needs
Okay.
to start there
Yep.
because when I see like things on social media, like a few years ago, I saw it was from a racetrack, but they like sent out a tweet that was like kind of mean towards low budget teams and drivers. Like it was like it was like a jab towards them. And I'm like,
Wow.
if the fans see the tracks doing that online or NASCAR or officials, or if they see the sanctioning body talking like that, then they think it's okay to talk like that. So I feel like the change needs to start with NASCAR. And I've said that for a while, but for
Yep.
us drivers, like what I feel like I can do, because like I only can control so much, is just speak about it, like
Yeah.
constantly talk about it. Like you can be a beautiful woman and love race cars. Like you can still want to go get your nails done during the week and then show up to the racetrack on the weekend
Right.
as a
Yeah.
fan, as a driver, as a engineer. And
Right.
just because, just because we're women doesn't mean that we can't like more than a male dominated industry. Just because we like a male dominated industry doesn't mean we like all the things that males like. We like to do other things too.
Mhm.
And when I feel like when fans see that, they can't comprehend it, that they
Yeah.
like, okay, how can you like,
Mhm.
getting dirty at the racetrack and being, the girl at the beach sipping on a margarita the next
Right.
day. Like that doesn't,
Right.
they can't
But that's
comprehend it. So I
yeah.
feel like if we talk about it as much as we can and show that like,
Mhm.
like you at the store being like your cute self in your jacket and be like, yeah, here's my picture with Kyle Busch. Like
Yeah,
now
it's
that guy's
like
going to be like, wow, hot girls can like NASCAR.
and see, I wish I had like recorded his face because it was the funniest thing ever. And I know he was like, "Oh my God, like it finally didn't work on someone." Like it was just the dread in
He's
his
hitting on
face.
you.
Yeah,
Girl,
I
he
don't know. It
was
was weird. And I was just like, dude, like, don't let me embarrass you like this. Like, that's
right?
so crazy.
And
And
then they
Kyle
get
actually
embarrassed
gave me,
easily.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kyle Busch gave me like a virtual fist bump too. That was the hilarious part. And
Woo!
everybody just like cracked up after that because I was like, oh man, that dude's so embarrassed. So if I ever see him again, now I got to show him that too. But yeah, I mean, it's just like it's frustrating that I can't just like be at a track and enjoy myself because I constantly feel like I'm being judged, but also just like I know people assume that I don't know anything about motorsports. I did have a couple people in Atlanta, like while I'm walking down pit road, they're like, "Oh, whose girlfriend are you?" And I'm like, "Nobody." Like, I'm here to see cars go
I
fast.
brought
Like, I'm
myself
not.
here.
Right, yeah. Like I drove the 8.5 hours by myself for the race. Like it's so frustrating sometimes. So yeah, like I do feel like it does need to come from NASCAR. I feel like they do need to do a better job. I know they're trying, but I feel like sometimes it just doesn't land the way that they intended, maybe.
Yeah, like, I see,
Um,
like, efforts that they put in, like, for I forget what it was with, like, if it's something with Women Month
mhm,
or something. I saw they put out a graphic, and I was telling
mhm.
my husband, I was like, "They need more than just a graphic." Like,
Yeah.
there are actual physical women in the sport, from engineers, tire changers,
Right.
drivers. Use
Yes.
their pictures, show their
Yes.
faces, because that's where the change is gonna happen, because a fan is going to scroll by the graphic and be like, "Oh, cool. Okay, it's Women's
Yeah.
Month or whatever's going on." But when they see a face, like, people fall in love with faces. People
Mhm.
become fans because they can connect with you. So if they
Yeah.
don't see a face, they're not going to connect. And I was like, they can do better. Don't
Yep.
just make a graphic. Show the faces of the women that put in the
Exactly.
effort to be in the sport.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we've all kind of talked about this too as a group, just, representation and how they can do a better job. So, it's good to hear it from you that you also are thinking along the same lines because I feel like it's probably a common, thought that people have. It needs to be a more like tangible thing that happens instead of just, hey, here's a fancy graphic we made. Like, I want to
Mhm.
see them out in the community. I want to see them, going to like boys and girls clubs and,
Yeah.
talking to the kids directly, like showing them, hey, this is a possible career path for you once you get out of high school or college, go like get out there in people's faces. Like I feel like that's the
Mhm.
only way to really fix it. But that's why I just try to do what I do and share my love for motorsports with people because they don't expect it to come from me. I like aerospace stuff too, and people don't expect that either. So I try to just surprise them. But it's because I want to make sure that they know we are represented, even if it is a small number, like we still exist. So
Yeah, and with you doing that, like,
yeah.
that's all, like, well, there's only so much we can do as,
Hmm.
as an individual, and for you to
Hmm.
go out and do the things you're doing, it's so important because even if you can just change one person's life that weekend at the racetrack, like, that's making a difference. And
Yeah.
that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's hard to keep that focus sometimes 'cause it just gets frustrating, but
It's
yeah, I
very
mean, it's
frustrating.
we just we just have to show up, and I feel like, with more women showing up in these roles and just in the fandom in general, I really feel like that'll help. So,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
love seeing girls at the track, like, it makes me
Yes.
so happy.
We all just, like, wave each other on pit road and like, "Oh my god, there's another woman." Like, this is great, you know? But yeah, I'm hoping we'll get more as the years continue.
Is
Absolutely.
that a topic that you talk about with the other women in the garage? So we've
Mm,
seen some growth in terms of having female representation on track. I think in your Daytona race there was 3 women that were driving, and it was like a 10-year stretch between Danica and your achievement in terms of leading laps. But is that something you guys ever talk about and say, these are moves we want to make, or do you feel pressure to try to implement change, or do you just think to yourself, I just have to be me, Natalie Decker, as a driver? Do those conversations ever go on?
Well, I think it's important for the girls to stick together. There's been a few instances where companies, sponsorships, or a brand deal or a TV show maybe that reach out to the women to work together, and sometimes these companies just want to look like they're supporting or helping because it makes them look better, but they actually aren't giving anything to us or helping us in any sort of way to boost our careers. So when things like that happen, it's really important for us girls to all stick together and like put our foot down together, because if we all stick together in those moments, everyone will come out better in the end, and it will just show that like you can't just run us over or use our names or do whatever it is to, make you guys look better. And that has happened a couple times. But like I feel like, I'm not like good friends and talk with all of the females. I don't know, like, for example, like I feel like I've never really held a conversation with Haley Deegan. That would be, and I raced against her at Daytona, and she's doing the whole Xfinity schedule. And now that we're in the same class, I feel like there's going to be a point where maybe we get to do like, something in the fan zone together. There's going to be a moment where we get to have that interaction and probably make that friendship. But all the other girls, like I have gotten to race with them at some point from ARCA to truck or something like that. So in the last couple years, and I've made those connections, and like every time we see them, like we're still girls. So when we see each other, we're like, like I love you. Like, oh my gosh, you look so good. Like, how's your car handling? Like, that's our conversation. Like, okay, tell us everything. Like, do you like your spotter? Like, you can vent to me. Like, what do you need?
Motorsports
Like,
girl talk. Love it.
Yeah. So but for example, like years before this, I would say like from my ARCA days and into the truck series, I did 2 years of on and off racing in the truck series before I moved to the Xfinity. And I wasn't super close with a lot of the girls to where I'm like, hey, we know all the details about each other. We're trying to help each other in any way possible, and we're all standing up for each other. I wasn't like that. And it was because I was scared. I wasn't scared of other girls or anyone like being better than me. I was scared of the industry. So I just didn't talk to anybody. I was terrified, and people put notions in my head, and they were getting to me, and people were trying to keep me under their thumb and not let me grow into the person I wanted to become. And I really feel like this year is the year where I'm like truly authentically myself, like no matter what. And it's about damn time, because I've been so sick and tired of like not feeling like I can be myself, and scared that like NASCAR is going to punish me, or a team is not going to want to work with me, or a sponsor is going to hate my personality. But the more I'm myself, the more like connections I'm making with the people that truly fit my lifestyle. And that goes for a lot of the girls. Like Logan is like, I love that girl so much, and she deserves to be in a race car, and she worked so hard. And we are very similar in our personalities. And I feel like because I'm letting myself be myself, I was able to make that friendship with her.
Mhm. No, I love that. I think you have to look out for each other a little bit, right? Like there has to be
Oh, for
some
sure.
sense of community whenever I think all of us have been in that situation where you're in the room and you only see one other person that looks like you, and you're like, oh,
Oh
all
my
right,
God.
like we got to stick together for a little while.
Friends
So,
forever.
yeah, right.
Yes.
Like bonds have been made whether we planned it or not.
Yes.
And then the other thing you mentioned was, that you have this confidence now. I would just imagine, I've never driven a race car, but I would just imagine that having that would make you better on track, right? Like you'd have like a better sense of, I don't want to say a sense of peace because that sounds kind of dramatic, but like a better sense of self, and like you're just more relaxed in the car, I would imagine.
Yeah, after the Daytona race and I got out of the car, I felt like really good. And it wasn't until like a few days later I went out to dinner with my family at this like really nice Mexican place by my house. I absolutely love it. That's like our go-to spot. That's where we went. And my dad was like, Natalie, you didn't even look like you raced your car. Like you looked so good. Like there was no sweat. Like you didn't look exhausted. And it was because I had full confidence in my team and in myself, that I wasn't tense in the car. And I feel like those moments where I get like where I'm not trusting the car, where I'm really uncomfortable, it's hard not to like flex every single muscle in your body, because the car's not doing what you want it to do. And everyone's so on edge in the radio. So those races, when I would get out of the car, I looked like I fell out of the seat, like I was exhausted and I couldn't make it through the race.
Right.
And it was just because there was so much stress the whole race. And at Daytona, it was just so relaxed. And it was very cold. So that's why I wasn't sweating. But but I was just really mentally like, racing is very physical, but it is more mental than anything. And mentally, I was at like a good space to where I felt that I could be relaxed in the car.
Interesting. And just for a quick second, because again, I have another bit of sort of bygone esoterica. So before we get to that, I do want to, circle back just for a moment. This certainly, the, diversity in the sense of community is, certainly something that, on this show we bleed about a lot, truly, because it's important. It's and a lot of times, you don't realize so much how important that kind of thing is until you finally find it. It's tough because, even in, what it's kind of, and I say this with all of the affection and endearment that I can manage, but kind of, a hobby, kind of, collection of misfits. We all like things that are made of metal and carbon fiber that go very, very quickly around a circuit for extended periods of time. But even then, it's like, and especially as, as a trans woman, it can still be difficult to find those sorts of, connections. And that's just, I appreciate a lot that you have, kind of highlighted that and, kind of the, basically the girl power within the paddock and how helpful that is. Still, I guess, still looking for mine, but one day, right? But anyway, another thing that I was kind of looking at because, as I alluded to, if it has a method of propulsion and you can race it, then chances are I'm interested. So, a funny thing was that former Formula One driver Jacques Villeneuve, used to race snowmobiles in his spare time, which I
Against
was
my
like,
dad.
and I was just about to
Yeah.
say that, and then the fact that
My
and
dad
again,
loves you right now for bringing this up, by the way. So
yes, and I was,
We've made
doing
one
a little bit
fan.
of reading, and I didn't connect, the dots until I'm doing this, and as I'm looking and reading up, I'm like, wait a minute, that's Natalie Decker's father, who is Jacques Villeneuve's teammate when they raced snowmobiles.
yes.
And I'm like, wow, okay. It's all of these little, kind of crossover points throughout history and throughout, particularly motorsports. It's just like, all you fools know each other.
It's so true, though. Like, and here's the crazy part, too, is so Danica Patrick's dad raced snowmobiles against my father as well, and they were best friends. And then my auntie Sue, who she married into the family, she raced snowmobiles as well. And one of her crew members was Danica's mom, and she set Danica's parents up on a blind date. And then they like fell in love, obviously, and had Danica and Danica's sister. And Danica's middle name is Sue after my auntie Sue. So
Oh
like
my
the
gosh.
snowmobile industry, like that's a whole
That's so
family.
funny.
Like everybody knows everybody. Everybody loves everybody. And they all like are rooting each other on. And it's like if you've raced snowmobiles, you've probably raced, in dirt bikes or dirt cars or road course racing. Like if you race snowmobiles, you've obviously raced something else. They didn't just race snowmobiles, but they were crazy enough to race those.
Which
So
I
I
think
was gonna
is
say,
which I think is super cool. And then just to add another layer of kind of WTF factor, the fact that your father and Jacques were racing for effectively the factory Bombardier team, and I'm like, wait, they have factory teams in snowmobile racing? People
Yes.
care about this
Wait.
that much that you have factory
It's
support?
crazy. Like the stories my dad told me about like them flying on private planes and like the amount of money that they put into their haulers and like the lifestyle was what like NASCAR is today, but for snowmobile racing.
That's so wild.
And snowmobile racing 40 some odd years ago at this point as well. That's also the
Yeah.
other thing. It's like you were hard pressed to find any true factory support and like full-fledged like auto racing at that time. It wasn't super common outside of really Formula One, which not to a huge extent, and NASCAR. And then even during the 80s, that was kind of the lull time in true factory support in the sport at that time. But freaking snowmobiles, yeah, absolutely. That is
So cool.
insanity. But yes, the fact that we have, I guess, kart, because of course Jacques, raced in kart before he made his way to Europe and then won the World Drivers title in '97. But the fact that there's a connection to that and NASCAR again, being 26 years later. I mean, Jacques won the title the year that you and I were born, Natalie. So,
Right. And well,
but
my dad started late having children, clearly.
well, yeah. But
Snowmobiling was more important at the time.
Priorities, he was living a
Priority.
rock star lifestyle from the sound of it, right?
Oh man.
Yeah.
yeah, but
Living it up.
I think
Funny.
that's like I said, I think that that's just one of those thing crossovers that I just think is kind of wild. And then your brain spirals the what if. Well, what if Jacques hadn't have gotten bored and had stayed racing snowmobiles? Then what would have happened?
Yeah.
And how does that influence the sort of history and lineage of both kart and Formula One? Like I said, it's one of those things that when you kind of dive into this, and this is the reason why I love this kind of stuff so much, is because you look at all some of these threads and you find some very surprising through lines sort of looking within them. But yes, I think that is absolutely fabulous. That was hanging out with the Villeneuve family, forever ago.
Yeah, I always ask my dad, I'm like, okay, you were a great snowmobile racer and you won the world championship and all of this, but you were in that time period to where you could have went and been a NASCAR driver. Like when he went into asphalt racing, he bought one of Mark Martin's late models, and that was like his first
Oh,
asphalt car.
dang.
And that's how, and he got into asphalt racing. But I'm like, you should have done it sooner. Like I could have had the last name Glory in the sport and been like already like set for life. You would have just decided to go
Give me a
NASCAR
golden
racing
ticket,
instead of
Dad. Come
snowmobile
on.
racing.
Oh man.
He
Yeah.
always tells me, he's like, if you wanted to be a professional snowmobile racer, he's like, it would have been so much easier. I know so many more people.
I was gonna
I
say
don't
that's
think
the
they show
paved
that.
road, right?
Yeah. Do they show that on ESPN? Like, I kind of want to revive this now and like grow the snowmobile fandom.
You need to
'Cause,
watch.
I
It's
feel
on
like it would
ice.
be
It's not even
awesome.
on
Yeah.
snow.
No, it's on
on
ice. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, it's on
oval,
ice,
and they
yeah.
hang
Yeah, they're
off this
frozen lakes,
sled.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
You have to Google like Eagle River,
everyone.
Wisconsin World Championship Snowmobile Derby
Mhm.
race, and you will see the craziest things.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like I said, I stumbled across it. It was one of my many things that I picked up having infinite free time during lockdowns and what have you, because I was running out of old NASCAR, sports car, and Formula One broadcasts to watch. So I'm like, okay, well, we need to start getting creative. And I stumbled upon it, and then stumbled across old news, old like newspaper, like in the sports section, like PDF articles about snowmobile racing and particularly in like Canada and the northern US,
Yeah,
northern
it's all
Michigan,
up there. That's
Wisconsin. Mhm.
well, and
Yeah.
the other crazy part is Tony Avi, the guy who owns my road racing team, who I road race with. The reason we know him is he raced snowmobiles with my dad as well.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Oh,
So,
Wow.
like
Okay.
everybody raced snowmobiles. I
guys.
swear, back then it was like the thing to do.
We've got to get a snowmobile now. We've got to get a
We gotta get a team. We need some.
This like
Let's
this
do it.
has to
Oh, my
happen
dad,
now.
we got a
That's
team.
so
We got a
funny.
shop. We got the snowmobiles up in Wisconsin. We could do this.
This is
I
so
say
funny.
I'm just over in Detroit. I am but a hop, skip, and a jump
was about to
away.
say,
That's a pretty
Danny's the
quick flight.
closest.
Yeah.
We can get
Come
the
on over.
VLV snowmobile
Oh
team.
my
I
god.
mean, I might be into
This is
that. That
so
might work.
funny.
Yeah, that sounds very fun.
It does.
Done, of course, amateur riding, going to northern Michigan during the winter. You pretty much don't get through one of those without learning at some point. But
Yeah.
the idea of racing those is it's so fantastically silly, and I love it. And also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Art.
No, I was just gonna say the nugget that Danica Patrick's existence is thanks to Natalie Decker's family is
That's
just
so funny.
the takeaway that I'm gonna have. A year from now, after I think about this interview, that's gonna be the main thing that I remember. That's just such a fun like baseball card fact, right?
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
I would never like. It's almost like a Mad Libs. Like you put matching names together, but like the fact that it's actually true, like that's
Right.
just so fun to me. I love that.
I love that. That's so funny.
And also, it's funny, you say, Dad would love me for, knowing the snowmobile stuff. The fact that you got your late model from Mark Martin, we've talked about it on the main show, where Art and Carl start going about Jimmy and Jeff. And I'm just sitting here like, but Martin, please.
Yes, he was my favorite driver. That's why I fell in love
Yes.
with NASCAR racing
Yes.
because
Yep.
Mark
my
was
dad
mine
told me
too.
the story about buying his late model, and I was watching him on TV, and I was like, all right, I'm a Mark Martin fan.
Yep,
Yeah.
same thing.
It's done.
Mark was my first driver that I was a fan of growing up.
Same. Oh, we're best friends.
See, my
Yeah,
thing was
I feel
Mark
like
just didn't have the paint schemes that Jeff Gordon had. As a kid, the paint scheme
Okay,
was
yeah.
critical.
I
Well,
get
Like,
see,
it,
it's
but
funny you say that because it's time in the number 6 in the Valvoline
the
Exceed
Valvoline
paint.
one was nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
yeah,
was actually because it
I
was
do
one of
like
my
that one.
aunts got me. Again, it's a little 64th. I might have it in a box somewhere. I don't know. Maybe when we put together the material to put this on socials, I'll see if I can find it and I'll send it to you guys. But yeah, and I had it. And then that was actually my first exposure. And then, when my aunt got me into motorsports because, she was watching me and she was like, well, what do you like? I'm like, well, I like cars. And so she put on, it was a
Aw.
NASCAR race. And it was Michigan. Actually, I think it was a Michigan race. And I mean, and this is, 2001, 2002. And then, of course, a child brain drawing the connections, the synapses like, oh, hey, wait a second. And then boom, that's away we went. Took a little bit of a sabbatical, for GT racing. Once I realized that there was something that Corvettes campaigned and I was off and away. And so that took me
Can't blame
down
you for that.
the American Le Mans series for a little while. So I did miss some of his time, particularly, the Hendrick part of his career. Because I was too busy watching Corvette's Death Star GT1. But I'll try not to wax lyricals about Corvette race cars in a show that has nothing to do with that. But yeah, no, Mark was my favorite. He was my first favorite growing up. And then it was Casey Kane for me after that.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Was
that.
yeah, was a favorite. But yeah, no, that's wild to know that. Yeah, got your first late model from Mark Martin, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
then so
cool.
that my dad, when he went to pick it up because my dad was the one racing it way back then, and he, when he went into the shop or whatever it was, he was like, he looked at Mark Martin, he was like, we're this same size. I won't have to do anything to the car because they're like identical. It was the same height, the same size. So I thought that was really funny. And after hearing that story, I was like, okay, now there's a connection that I can put to Mark Martin and my dad and racing. I'm like, I'm going to be the biggest NASCAR fan ever, especially Mark Martin.
well, like I said, you don't talk about family connections. Your dad collected them like Infinity Stones, the Patricks, the Villeneuves, Mark Martin. It's like, goodness
That's
gracious.
I
wild.
know.
That
And
was
then like the other thing is it's like, I swear the snowmobiling industry is so big because all of a sudden I'm like, okay, dad, like name drop a couple of your friends. They're probably really famous and like doing really cool things. And he was like, oh, I don't know. And then out of nowhere, we get a call from a guy who used to race snowmobiles. He didn't anymore. And he doesn't anymore. And he was much younger than my dad. So he like looked up to my dad and all my dad's brothers that raced. And he doesn't live in Charlotte, but he owns the McLaren dealership here in Charlotte. And we got to like
Oh,
go like tour everything and meet him and hear all the stories. And I'm like, Dad, you
and
know the coolest people from snowmobile
that's funny. And I've been to
Jeez,
McLaren
man.
Charlotte a couple of times.
Oh my
I've
gosh,
Through the
driven by it.
travels,
Yeah,
and
it's a
yeah,
impressive estate.
that's awesome.
that's absolutely insane. I am if what I wouldn't give for just a fraction of that. Good God.
Right,
The
like
Rolodex, right? The
somebody
Rolodex
just.
is thick.
Oh man,
All
It's so
righty.
cool.
Anybody else got anything?
Yeah, I got one last question. Because I meant to ask earlier, and since we're wrapping, this might be a perfect time for it. So you started racing at 9. Um, what advice would you give to any other 9-year-old girls out there right now that see you, that see the other women that are driving? What would you say to them? What would you say to your 9-year-old Natalie, maybe? What advice would you have?
Oh, I feel like there's just so much that I wish I could have like told myself at 9, or if I could tell another young girl getting into the sport. But I feel like I always go to like the same type of answer because it truly is the reason why I'm still going and still racing, because it can get really difficult, and like sometimes you don't want to pick yourself back up, like if you fail or someone else fails you, and it's like it can get mentally difficult, and easily you could be like, okay, I'm done. But the reason why I feel like I've still fought my way every year these last few years I've been in NASCAR is because of my family. And I'm very lucky to have a family that's blood, my parents that come to every race weekend. And then now my husband and my Auntie Sue. Well, she married into the family, but she's my Auntie Sue forever. But like all these people that truly care about me and want what's best for me, and they're my support system. So when I have those days where I mentally can't handle it anymore and I feel like I want to give up, I can lean towards these people that care about me and will pick me back up and help guide me for a little bit until I can go off on my own again and keep fighting by myself. So to have that, and some people, that might be your brother or your sister or your best friend or your grandparents, a teacher, like it could literally be anybody, but to have that person to turn to when you're down and need that little extra boost is so important. And it's just so important in life in general. But I feel like that's the only reason why every year that we come into a new race season and I'm like, do I want to fight again? It is so difficult. I don't feel wanted in the sport. There are good teams out there that love me and care about me and want what's best for me. And then there's people in the sport that just could care less, and it's hard. But to have the people that you can turn to that absolutely want what's best for you at all times is the reason to keep going, because they're going to be there for you. And I feel like I always kind of turn to that answer no matter what. But there's one other thing is you truly need to believe it in your heart. Like whatever that is that you want to achieve, you really need to believe it in your heart and believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be hard to get other people to believe in you. And then when other people are telling you like you're wrong, or no, you can't do that, or just anything negative towards what you believe in and what you want, and that can be very scary, and like where you want to like crawl inside yourself and be like, okay, and like be like, you're right. Stand up for yourself and believe in yourself, because that has happened to me so much, especially when I came into the ARCA series, of people that I felt like I could look up to trying to form me into someone I wasn't, and telling me like when I'd be like, oh, the car's doing this, or I need this, or this will make me a better driver, can you help me with this? And they're like, no, actually, I've been in the sport longer than you, this is what you need. And then I would listen to that, and it's like, okay, I need to trust my heart and believe in myself, because that was wrong. And it really set me back for a couple years. And like I've said this a couple of times this year, and I don't have funding going into any other races this season. I only had funding for Daytona, but like I 100% believe this is my year, and like my year to happiness and my year to success and all these things. Like I truly believe it in my heart. And it's like this feeling I have. Because I'm changing as a person. I'm not going to let anyone tell me like who I am or who I need to act like to make it in the sport. Like I'm going to be myself and work my butt off to be here and in the sport. So if I could like tell myself that when I was younger, or tell any other little girl or little boy that's coming into this sport that wants it so bad, that's what I wish I could tell them, or wish I could tell myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kiana?
That's pretty close to what I was gonna ask, but you know what? Now that you've had, especially your experience at Daytona, what does success look like for you? And what do what will be the moment where you're like, oh my gosh, like I made it, like this is it?
It's so crazy to hear, like, what is that turning point of like, I made it? Because if
Mhm.
I look back at when I was 15 years old and all the NASCAR starts I've already gotten to do, my 15-year-old self would be like, she made it. But
Yeah.
now that I'm
Right.
here, I've like reset goals for
Yep.
myself.
Mhm.
And that goal that I've reset for myself is to do a full season at some point in my career. Like that would be like, okay, I made it.
Mhm.
And then success for me is constantly learning and evolving in the sport as a driver and breaking records, my own records or records that have already been set. Like I just want to keep going out there and having fun. And when I'm having fun, I'm running well. So
Yep.
obviously every driver's goal is to be in victory lane. Like that is the ultimate goal. And then past that is winning championships. And I've had those feelings before. I've had those moments before. I've won championships. I've won races. So I know what that feels like. But I've been so scared to show up to a NASCAR race feeling as a winner before I even walk into the track, or feeling as if I could win a race, because I've been so scared of everybody and how everyone has treated me or made me feel like what success should look like for a female in the sport. And
Mhm.
that's the other thing. On our way home from Daytona, my husband and I were driving home, and I told him, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. It might not change anything in any of the races I'm doing, or it could be the biggest change in my life, but I'm going to make myself feel like a winner every time I'm going to a racetrack. I'm going to have the mindset of a winner, and I'm just going to see what it does for me.
No, that's perfect. And I feel like, especially as a woman, like we really have to have that moment where we just hype ourselves up sometimes. Like sometimes I get up, I had a big meeting earlier today and I had to lead it. It was like 30 people in the meeting. It's this huge project that
You
I'm
go,
doing.
girl.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I mean, it was one of those things like I just had to like, put on some Beyonce for a second and just,
Yes, that's music, dancing. Ooh, that will
yeah.
hype me up.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it really does make a difference when you just like you have to refocus your mind and just be like, you know what, I got this. I've done this a million times. I've earned my spot here. You really just have to convince yourself that you're supposed to be in that space. And I feel like, again, as women, and then, for me as a Black woman, like I just feel like a lot of times I can get very caught up in the bad parts of that. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like you really just have to have that like champion mindset going into things.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's funny you say that because I talked a little about it before we started recording, but running the shop by myself
Mm-hmm.
today, and actually have been doing intermittently for the past couple of weeks, and it still it makes me a little nervous every time. And then also, additionally, frankly, leading the main show here, because like I said, I didn't mean to do the sports car show all the time, but that's ooh, pardon me, frankly, a little bit smaller in scope, and certainly if the analytics or anything to go by doesn't get quite the same number as eyeballs. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like I can shrink away a little bit and it's fine. But and I'm thinking, and I'm pacing back and forth in the shop this afternoon. I'm like, okay, I'm leading this. It's like, okay, it's like you know um in this case, and versus, WWJD, what would Jesus do? What would Jarrett? Because that is our usual MC for these. It's like, okay, what would he do? It's like, how can I figure this out? And well, not quite sure I'm a Jarrett, but I think I've done reasonably well for myself this evening.
Do you realize how inflated his ego is going to be after
Oh
that?
God.
To
Do
be
you
fair, I think
realize
he's
what
earned
you've
it.
done?
I was just thinking about that. Oh God.
We're never going to hear the end of that now.
Shout out to Jarrett. Lord have mercy.
To be fair, I think for all of the episodes and leading throughout this time, I think he's earned it. But I guess on that wonderfully silly note, we're gonna wrap it and rubber stamp it there. Thank you so much, Natalie, for coming on and spending actually a little over an hour with us this evening. It was absolutely fabulous to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. We need to do it again.
Yes,
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 definitely. Yeah.
absolutely.
We
And can you
absolutely
tell the
will.
people where they can find you online on all the socials?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're doing a new docu-series on my YouTube channel, and the videos are just so amazing. So please check that out on YouTube. But it'll be super easy if you just go to Natalie Decker Inc.com. All my socials linked there. My merch is there, and all the different articles and newsletters about me. So it's the easiest. Just go to the website. But other than that, I'm on all the platforms, and I'm very active. So come hang out with me on the social media because I love it.
All righty. And with that, I guess we will take it away. Thank you so much. And we will return to sort of normal programming. You will not hear my voice on the main pod, but Jarrett will be back, and I will go retreat to my little hole at chicanery, and all the world will correct itself.
We're
But with
cutting all
that,
that out. That's not going to be in there. We're cutting all that out. No.
but until next time, folks.